So, if you had everything that you ever dreamed of, do you honestly think you would be sitting here watching this video right now? Because if I had to guess, the answer would be no. Our dreams and our reality are often two very separate things, and accepting the difference between our dreams and reality is an essential part of our lives. In the book Sputnik, Sweetheart and Kafka on the Shore by Haruki Murakami, he explores the ideas of these differences between our dreams and reality in depth. And he does so between the physical descriptions of his characters, the isolation of his narrators, as well as the relationships the characters form with each other. And now a bit of context to begin. So Sputnik Sweetheart is a story about three characters, Kei, Sumair, and Miyu. And now Kei is in love with Sumair, as he's known her ever since they were in college, and they're very close friends. But the issue is that Sumair is in love with this older woman she meets named Miyu, and she starts to work for her as her secretary. And so Sumair and Miyu eventually go traveling to Europe for work business, and Sumair goes missing on a Greek island. So Kei is called by Miyu, and he has to fly from Japan to this island in Greece to help find Sumair, because Miyu doesn't know what else to do. And this story just follows these three characters and how they build relationships with each other. And the other book, Kafka on the Shore, is two stories that are sort of intertwined. So the first one is about a boy named Kafka who runs away from his home as his father is abusive and gives him an Oedipus-style prophecy that he's going to kill his father and sleep with his mother and older sister. And Kafka lives in Tokyo, so he runs from Tokyo to Shikoku and to town Takamasu, and on the way he meets a girl named Sakura, and she is the same age as his sister would be, and also he meets an older woman named Miss Psyche, who is the same age as his mother would be. And now it's never stated explicitly that these two women are blood related to Kafka, but it's implied through reading the novel. And Kafka just has to deal with this prophecy and how he wants to live his life and these new surroundings away from his father. And the other essential character to the story is Nakata, who's an older man. From when he was little during World War II, he lost his ability to read and his intelligence in a freak accident that was very mysterious. And ever since this accident happened, he's had the ability to talk to cats. And his story begins when he ends up killing Kafka's father. Coincidentally, they don't know each other, because Kafka's father was known as the cat killer by all the neighborhood cats that Nakata would talk to. So Nakata ends up killing Kafka's father, and since it was a murder and Nakata's a human, he has to run away because he doesn't want to get captured by the police. So he, coincidentally, again, ends up in Takamasu at the same library that Kafka was at. And his mission in Takamasu is to open what's called the Entrance Stone. And I believe that the Entrance Stone is symbolic of the dreams and reality, as its function once it's opened is it opens a portal, essentially, to a different dimension. And Kafka goes through this portal at the end of the book and learns some things about himself and kind of grows as a person. Now, the first point that I like to discuss is the physical descriptions of the characters and how different aspects of these characters symbolize the dreams and the reality of these, the characters. So the first example of this is Miyu. So she is in her 40s when the events of Sputnik Sweetheart take place, but her hair is all white, which isn't natural for someone of her age. So the thing is, we learn about what happened to her at the end of the novel. So when she was in her 20s, she was in Switzerland because she wanted to be the greatest concert pianist in the world. So one night she's in Switzerland and she goes on this Ferris wheel. And on page 154, it says that she found looking in her own empty room far more absorbing than looking in the apartments around her home. And this was symbolic of how self-obsessed Miyu was at this time period, because she wanted to be the greatest pianist, and she didn't care what anyone else thought about her, so she was just looking in her own empty room because it was just so enthralling. But eventually what she sees is herself in this apartment with a man that she knew sleeping together. And it was so crazy for her because she was in the Ferris wheel, but yet she was also in the apartment with this man. And after this event, she, on page 157, it said it took away all her black hair, her sexual desire, her periods, her ovulation, and perhaps even her will to live. So these two Miyus that were described by Murakami are symbolic of Miyu's dreams and Miyu's reality. So the Miyu in the apartment, the one who's sleeping with this man, that's Miyu's dreams, as she had everything that Miyu wanted. She could have continued on in Switzerland and become the greatest concert pianist that existed in the world. But the Miyu on the Ferris wheel represents Miyu's reality, as now after this event, she leaves Switzerland, goes back to Japan, and does a job that she doesn't want to do. And on page 158, she tells Sumair, as far as the recording industry is concerned, 20 top-notch pianists are plenty. No one is going to care if I wasn't one of them. She completely gave up on her dreams after this event. And her reality is symbolized by her white hair, as this is just different from her dreams. It's like the complete opposite, black and white. So the white hair is the complete opposite of her dreams, which means that her reality is now the opposite of what she wanted out of her life. And now another example that I like to discuss is Sumair, because once Sumair started working for Miu, she completely changed her outward appearance. On page 43, she said that the clothes fit me like a glove. The dresses, the blouse, skirts, everything. And this is so interesting because she did a complete 180 of her fashion from before she worked for Miu to after she started working for Miu. So before, Kay described her fashion as true. At times, her style resembled a patchwork quilt sewn by a group of stubborn old ladies on page 14. So she completely changed her outward appearance to work with Miu. And this shift in Sumair's appearance symbolized that her shift in her dreams. Because before, her dream was to be a star author, and she was going to write all these books. But now her dream was to be with Miu, as she was completely in love with Miu. And one of the literary criticisms that I found says that early in Sputnik Sweetheart, when Sumair is still bewildered by her love for Miu, the hero tells her that she's caught up in a fiction whose plot she doesn't yet grasp, but that's inarrestably reinventing who she is. So this literary criticism backs up what I said, as Miu is just completely enthralled by, I'm sorry, Sumair is completely enthralled by Miu, so therefore she changes her whole look and does all this stuff, including she learns Italian so they can go to Rome, and she just learns all this stuff to be with Miu and to do whatever she wants. And it just, her reality is adjusted to fit her new dream. And then the last example of this I'd like to discuss is Miss Psyche, as when Kafka's living in the library, he lives there as he doesn't have anywhere else to go. He lives in the library, and at night, he sees the ghost of a 15-year-old girl, but this ghost is someone who's still alive. It's Miss Psyche, but it's the 15-year-old version of herself. And Kafka realizes this as she just looks just like her, but younger. So the reason why this is a thing is because Miss Psyche, when she was a child, she was in love with this boy, and they were together forever, until he died at the age of 20. So after this, Miss Psyche completely became a husk of her former self, much like Miu did with the Ferris wheel incident. But Miss Psyche just lost all her will to live, and she just went through the motions because of her boyfriend's death. So on page 218, it says the ghost, this 15-year-old girl, is sitting at the desk, chin resting in her hand, staring at the wall and thinking about something, nothing too complex. So this ghost is just symbolic of Miss Psyche's dreams, as she isn't doing anything that's crazy. She's just sitting there pondering life as a 15-year-old girl would. And one of my literary criticisms says that in Kafka's story, this unique time and place where the past converges with the present and the living meet the dead functions as a place of healing and recovery. So this ghost that Kafka can see is a step for Miss Psyche to heal from the trauma of her boyfriend, because Kafka is able to see Miss Psyche as she was before the boyfriend's death, and now she can truly move on as someone understands what she went through. And she dies at the end of the book, but she's able to die, like she's able to rest in peace, basically. And now the next point I'd like to get into is about the isolation of the narrator. So in Sputnik Sweetheart, Kay's main thing is that he is in love with Sumair. Sumair is his only friend, and that's all he thinks about. And once Sumair goes missing in the middle of the book, on page 76, he says, I was only still half grown up. Huey Lewis and the News had a couple hit songs then, not 70 years ago. So this Huey Lewis and the News is completely arbitrary, but it's this band that when he was still in college, they were a new band, but now that he's older, they're more successful and people know who they are. And it's a retrospective for him, because he realizes that he's aged so much, and he hasn't even realized that because he's been so isolated from the rest of the world because of Sumair. But now she's missing, so he has to adjust his everyday life. And one of the literary criticisms I have backed this up. It says, caught in the spiritual undertow of a preposterous secular age, Murakami's rootless heroes are constantly being drawn into stories they don't quite understand, stories that seem to be controlled by somebody else. And Kay's story in this case is controlled by Sumair. He doesn't have his own feelings. He only cares about Sumair. And this is kind of exemplified at the end of the book, when he comes back to Japan as he's a teacher, so he needs to start the new year. And Sumair still isn't there, so he has to kind of refocus, and he ends up talking to this boy named Carrot. That's his nickname, not his real name. And less talking and more monologuing to him about his experience in Greece. On page 192, it says that Carrot slowly raised his head and looked at me. He didn't say anything. This wasn't a conversation. This was just Kay expressing how he felt to someone who couldn't walk away because it was one of his students. And it shows that how isolated he was, because he's talking to this random 10-year-old boy about his life when he shouldn't be, because what is a 10-year-old boy going to do? Because he doesn't understand. But Kay was completely isolated, and because of his dream of being with Sumire, and now that she's gone, he has to face the reality of his world. And Kafka, he's isolated from the world because he is so terrified of making this prophecy that his father gave him come true. So when he goes to Takamasu, he meets this man named Oshima, and Oshima is kind of a teacher figure to Kafka. So on page 204, he says to Oshima, Oshima, I don't want to do those things. I don't want to kill my father or be with my mother and sister, not even in dreams. So Kafka is so terrified of fulfilling the reality of fulfilling the prophecy that he doesn't want to interact with anyone, and like his dream is to just be alone forever. And this is seen in when he goes, there's this cabin that Oshima has that he brings Kafka to because Kafka needs to lay low after the police are trying to find him because he ran away. And on page 137 it says, being pummeled by the rain so hard made me feel strangely purified. I want to hold that onto that sensation a little while longer. So being completely alone in this cabin in the middle of nowhere made Kafka feel so good because he was away from everyone and he couldn't fulfill the prophecy, and he was fulfilling his dream by not engaging in the reality that his father wanted. And one of the literary criticisms I had, it said that in absconding from home, is Kafka running away from or embracing his fate? So this quote, it really just brings out the aspect of the dreams versus reality. So is Kafka's action of running away, is that, and isolating himself in Takamasu, is that fulfilling his father's reality, or is he trying to embrace his own reality? But the thing is that he ends up he meets with Misaki and Sakura anyway, so he ends up fulfilling the prophecy, but it's because of his isolation and because he was trying so hard to not do it that it happened anyway. And now the last point I'd like to get into is about the relationships the characters form with each other. So the big relationship in Sputnik Sweetheart is with Kei and Sumire. So on page 177, Kei says, all over again, I understood how important, how irreplaceable Sumire was to me. In her own special way, she kept me tethered to the world. So Kei loved Sumire with all his heart, and he didn't know what to do when she was gone. And like I said in the previous point, once she was gone, he had to adjust to his new reality without her being there and change his dreams because now he couldn't be with her. And now he was, in a way, sort of a husk of his former self without Sumire. And with Sumire herself, something that was interesting is that even though she was an anchor for Kei, she didn't love herself at all. Because one of the literary criticism, talking about her name. So her name means violet, and her mother got this name from this random song that she listened to. So, quote, her name represents a delicate flower and is connected to her mother's love. However, when she chooses to associate with violence, the hatred for something which she owns inadvertently creates a regular identity that further transfers into her inability to stay focused, and she quits college to become a writer. So Sumire's name is given to her by her mother out of love, but the context of the song that she gets the name from is very violent. It was something along the lines of, oh, the beautiful flower, beautiful violet was trampled by a horse or something. It was just trampled, right? So Sumire, once she realizes this, she gives up the dream of her mother loving her and thinks that just because her name came from this song that was in a negative connotation, she thinks that her reality now has to be, I have to make something of myself, and that's why she chooses to drop out of college and become a writer. And the other key relationships in Kafka on the Shore are with Nakata. So as I mentioned in the context portion of this video, Nakata can speak to cats. And this is just really interesting because that's not something that happens in real life. Yet the cats mean so much to Nakata because they're the only ones who really get him, because the humans don't understand him because he says it himself so many times in this book. I'm not smart, I'm not that bright. But this one cat named Mimi, who's this like fancy Siamese cat, and she knows she's very cultured because her owners are rich. And she tells him on page 83, Mr. Nakata, this world is a terribly violent place, and nobody can escape the violence. Please keep that in mind. You can't be too cautious. The same holds true for cats and human beings. So this cat, she's a cat. Her name's Mimi, right? And she just tells Nakata this, and this is very wise words coming from a cat. Because you don't think that cats know anything, but they, in this story, they happen too, because they're given human qualities by the author. And this relationship with the cats kind of centers Nakata in reality because he can't do that with humans, and once he is unable to talk to them, he shifts and he does the entrance stone quest in Takamasu because he can't talk to the cats anymore. And one of my later criticisms backs this up. It says, and his murder by Nakata indicates the cruelty of war and danger by countering violence with violence. The senseless slaughtering of cats might well be a metaphor of how humans appearing anthropomorphized cats are mutilated by the state, or be it imperial or post-capitalist. So this quote, it's not really about the relationship between the humans and the cats, but more so what the cats serve as in this novel. So the cats are basically people, because Nakata can talk to them. And Kafka's father kills these cats, and Nakata kind of takes revenge and kills Kafka's father. And the cats just... In literature, cats are always a symbol of darkness, and... Not always, but a lot of the time. So in this book, they do symbolize darkness, because whenever Nakata talks to the cats, it's always about something bad. It's always about, I have to find a missing cat, or I have to find this man who kills cats. And it brings it all back, because Nakata doesn't have a dream like the other characters. He exists. But these cats give him what other people get from humans. So, yeah. So in conclusion, the books Sputnik Sweetheart and Kafka on the Shore by Haruki Murakami discuss the differences between the characters' dreams and their reality through a variety of different aspects, and as that accepting these differences and adjusting your dreams to fit your reality is important, because if you don't do that, you're going to end up like Miyu or like Miss Psyche, where you're just a shell of a person. You can't do anything. You're lost. You're a lost soul, basically. So yeah, thank you for listening, and have a great day.